you've joined today. And thank you all who are listening later when this recording is shared. Thank you all who are came here to support this project. And thank you to my mentor Ariella for being such a warm, structural guide. And they really helped me bring this project to fruition. And I so appreciative of all my friends and family who also stuck with me through these turbulent 4 years. All right. This project is my testimony and love letter to you all. Imagine this rope as my outstretched hand, tightly held as we walk through a thicket of material. This is my installation where the rope lays. And I'll walk you through it. This is an installation check I did a couple of days ago. Let me give a brief 360. Obviously, if you can see my little view, some things have been shifted since. And I found that this installation has been in flux up until the very end, when I had to encounter space characteristics of Beckham. It's an interesting translation from working in the studio to installing in a public space. And all these objects in this room are arranged in a way that feels much more akin to me, haphazard, unorganized, messy. And this is how I express myself, I guess. It's crude, it's quick, and you can tell that objects are raw and unprocessed. And I really lean into the inconsistencies and the happy mistakes. That's where I find nuance in poetry. Also want to shout out to the PNCA facilities for mounting up those hinges onto the wall there. Thank you, Patrick. Some sketchbooks over the past few years. And coincidentally, all of those sketchbooks are made in the time of my duration here at PNCA. This large painting drawing. And you'll notice that this is a painting oral, and there's a few paintings in here, and I'm very attracted in a lot of different materials, desire my attention. Thus, it's inflation. All right. I guess it all started when I was young. I grew up going to summer camps and private, just after school to Girl Scouts and YMCA. And I learned things like crafting friendship bracelets. And over time, it just was a way for me to make friends. And I really fell in love with the process of creating this object, since it was so easy. And this affair has been with me ever since. Moving to Portland from Dayton, Ohio was a culture shock. Dayton, Ohio is in the top 20 of the most segregated cities. So to conceptually temper my experience of being around like bodies to being a visual minority, I had to mediate or meditate through this making process of not making and twisting and creating these friendship bracelets. Since it's been with me so long, it felt suited for me to put all of the tensions I felt inside into this object, creating a very solid meditative practice. when I pattern draft this object from a bracelet to something much larger, I found that my body felt more satisfied and less anxious when I felt like I was able to process like much larger feelings and tensions and really like embed it into this catalyst-like object of this rope. How like the knots are like as tight of like the function I felt at that moment, or just like the stress, you know? Um, yeah, it's a very meditative process for me. I wanted to finally articulate and tether two plates together by using materials found in Portland, Oregon and Dayton, Ohio. I, through material, in my head, knotted, braided, and twisted these pieces together. And it grew. It grew much larger and more, it had to encounter it as like a body, instead of an object anymore, something that I could hold, but I had to feel the weight of like the time and the length of like distance I had across from the Midwest to the Pacific Northwest. As I was making rope, I had to start, I had to find new spaces to knot and tie it. The shared space, the studio space at the time wasn't big enough, but it was too closed in and too tight, where I moved the work outside and in front of the school in the parking lot and just started walking across the street and taking pictures from the park blocks and like seeing it more like a line instead of like this large object I've been knotting and twisting for so long. It kind of made it abstract and much more smaller for me. That distance I put between the rope and I. Above the atrium, I perched and knotted this rope to the railing. And I did this as a way to kind of show PNCA and the public before I like took it home for the semester. The rope wanted to say goodbye before Papa took it home. The first big shift and climax for me with this object, with this rope, is when I started to perform with it. I was using it as a painting tool here, and I wanted to see like how else I would like treat it besides just looking at it and just like making it. And this was during I think the 2018 lunchtime thesis focus week talk, and I had to like trip and like stumble in front of like all of my peers, and I was really like kind of zoned out like in this making process because I was still encountering it with as like a dancing partner, like as a large thing I had to like collide with to make art. It felt um, like an extension of my body, but it also felt new and like as if I was like a fawn just born. I couldn't really walk on like my two legs. And you'll see um, performance in this like in my later works, but like kind of transform in a different way. If I'm like working with it and manifesting with it, I guess. How are we? Again, time. What the hell am I gonna do with this object next? I said to myself. I was stumped where to go next. I performed with it, but what am I gonna do with it? So it became a subject to draw from. Um, my my friend and respected artist Eel Howe also drew the performance in this rope around the same time I was. So I was like really thinking of the image of the rope and how I could lean into it and how it could bring up new emotions or release new tensions out of me. And also thank you, Eel, for making this proper etching here. I was really appreciative. As I was documenting this object, I was using it in my collages as like material, and I had to encounter this rope as a digital image and like that digital tactility that I had no hand in making. It was like mediated through this technology. It felt way different from just like knotting and twisting and wrapping the rope, and it went to like this clicking of like you hit the button and something happens. It felt like very like shorthand. Um, so you'll see me overlay it on top of like the works to kind of like embed like tactility or like texture or a type of I don't know. I just wanted to kind of mediate that instant gratification. I didn't want it to be over when I click a button. I wanted it to kind of be worked in more. Um, so yeah, there's the digital tactility of this object. And recently, my peers started to take images of this object as well. Lucky used this rope in his residency to articulate what he felt towards his own art. And I'll read a quote that he posted. This image represents the power of Black, trans, non-binary, and queer love. It represents the channeling of ancestral beauty and veneration through my art, honoring myself and the people that I love. And to be honest, end quote. I am still in shock that others are attracted to this object other than me. Now, regarding my work, I'm not interested in involving bodies because of the tensions people of color and Black bodies have with rope and the subject of history and power. But since other artists like Lucky are drawn towards this rope, I am more willing to introduce this rope as something to wear or to hold more than I was before earlier in 2018. Eureka! I have created a complex object that has digital, physical, and conceptual tactility. I'm going to name it a hyper object because this is where my research has been for the past like 3 years. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's many ways to say a word, and there's multiple ways to perceive a subject and object. Subsistence is the transformation of higher dimensional objects and transforming it into a lower dimensional object. It refers to a movement between the dimensional gap. And in this installation, it is the performance this rope is showing you. And this is my conceptual way to animate the static form. I'm pulling from John Baudrillard, simulacra and simulation to suspend your belief and to get away of claiming that one object has multiple tactilities. A quote from this book. The procession of simulacra, there is no longer a medium in a literal sense. It is now intangible, diffused and diffracted in the real, and no one can no longer say that the medium is altered by it. To really lean in that this object is one object, my intention of engaging this space was conceptually tied to mythology of like Ouroboros. And Ouroboros kind of symbolize like continuation and a looping of time and protection. The still frame is a snake eating its own tail. And in the still, it's displaying self-destruction, but also creates a halo in a circle that protects what is within it, or it's just protecting itself. So one organism, one rope. Keep that in your mind as we travel through all the iterations I went through. A source and like inspiration I kind of tied was this Brazilian artist, Janiana Melolandi. Her artistic output encompasses her knowledge of architecture, physics, and mathematics, and her observations about time to weave their worldview. Her work transits different scales from the object to public spaces. Parts of my practice aren't meant to see the public. This object is a commission piece that my good friend had me do over the summer. And since I had to like live with my work and really perform like outside of like this space, parts of this work aren't really activated and outside of an intimate household. Like, you know, like my private collectors are usually my friend, like my family and friends or like close acquaintances. And I've included this image here because I wouldn't have researched net making or a type of way to engage with my rope without this project or this commission I had to do, or I was commissioned to do. And here's another image of the installation again from like counterclockwise. You'll see the rope diffracted both in tactility and material all the way to the end once you exit the door. This is kind of what I was like thinking in my head when I was installing it. That's for me that are accompanying the rope is a symbol and an active initiative for me to gather all of these materials, objects, and theories for this particular spectacle. Paper offered a fresh take on knotting a line. Extra steps like processing the paper and shifting how roughly I treated it, because the cordage will give and tear because it's paper, it slowed me down to consider how the material can be articulated in this way through this material. And I guess it didn't become more meditative, it became more nuanced. As a contrasting jump and a tension of both additive and subtractive process, the paper appears again, but this time as a two-dimensional object. I cut and gouged and scalped parts of the paper to reveal the form and image of the rope. And yeah, the subtractive process, and for me, is a much more violent and a much more like intense process because like, oh, scalpel slip. I actually have a paper cut or something like that, or it's much more dangerous than like just rubbing paper into a cord and like gathering it and gently knotting my rope. It's way different, and it's both made with like similar material paper, which I found to be really interesting. I'm really leaning into that tension of how like material can be juxtaposed next to each other. Paper appears again behind the veil, and you'll see me use objects you can see from far away to like small images to kind of engage with the viewer of the work calling out to you to come closer. And this is an act of intimacy for me to have someone who may have no interest in it before, but engage with it as those few step closers. And the more like proximity like closes, the closer you can kiss the object, and it's just it's interesting for me for something inanimate and like just there to like cause us to our reaction in that way. You'll see me approach a space again, trying to engage with that come hither type of approach. So where I like tuck in the paper cutouts into like the cracks of the foundation and like tuck up some tape transfer poetry in there so you can like squint and like really get in there. Yeah. Let's see. Entering a bigger space, I had to think of other ways to draw a viewer. And drawing and painting for me was like the next step of like kind of tearing this object apart into like where it's nothing, where it's a two-dimensional form to this like shorthand little scribble of something that can be like quick and drawn fast, and it doesn't have like all the tactility a rope has anymore. And a lot of things have been lost in translation from the rope up to this point. But it also brought up new avenues of creating and like articulating this object to you all. We'll have this painting here. This is the little hinged. That cardboard disc you saw under there, just kind of like is this repeating symbol of like this cycle you see on the internet. It's here conceptually Ouroboros and some images, and this is there to like the continuation and like the symbol of like both like digital, but also like a wheel or something that keeps going on until it bumps into a little rock to stop it. So the painting right adjacent to the wall here, a rope no longer. And here for me, it like painting, like I use paint for its tactility of like, I layer gesso on top of each other and how I get that deco of that scratchiness that I'm looking for in a nice oil painting. But I really like leaned away from it here to this this more flat and less tactile application, because that's like the stage where I felt the rope was at the point of where um, I'm not nodding, I'm not grabbing, I'm not holding, but I'm taking a mark making implement and I'm pushing and I'm drawing and it touches a different part of my brain. And yeah, it just contrasts is like something that's opposing it, like behind me, this rope, like it is a rope no longer. It's a drawing, it's a painting, it's something else, but it can't be the same thing, you know? To abstract this object even deeper and to kind of diffract it and disperse it from its origin, I lean towards social media where I could share it much more readily, and it has this digital tactility. And like, so if everyone just like goes to where the rope lays, you could see like some images um, that are the rope you see behind me, and like it is the object. So like um, the the project kind of called like documentation and this thing I've already been doing into the work because it is uh, a moment in time, and it's a transformation, and it's a stage and all the iterations group can have, and like our digital documentation, like just it's parts of our work. It's not separate from it at all. It's intrinsically tied. The paper really flowed well onto a, a digital medium because I was working with a silhouette, and anything white behind it kind of illuminated the image. So, I mean, we're watching Zoom right now. We're watching an illuminated screen. So the the shadow puppetry, the thing there kind of simulates a digital experience for me, or it kind of collides together, which I find really interesting. And if somebody asks a question about that, I'll be happy to answer, or like really dive deep because I could make a whole different slide about it. All right, running out of time. I also with social media, I was using the algorithm of like the gridded form to create new compositions and new ways of collaging and new ways of seeing this rope and like creating a drawing. Um, uh, my writing doesn't see the public, doesn't see the light of day, almost never. So I had to mediate it through a process called tape transfers. And this for me kind of gave me like a much more, like a position where I had much more control of how much I wanted to show you, or how much, or what I could leave up to chance for the words to reveal themselves. And the fun thing about this process is that not every word transfers onto the matrix tape. And so it kind of reflects back to that loss in translation of like working in a two-dimensional type way of drawing, opposed to knotting and twisting and braiding I had with this rope. So um, it's like a motif to kind of like reiterate through this inspection. Uh, After text, what's next? This book is chemically burned with bleach and dish soap, and it's there as the kind of object of this destructive, abstract type tension of like something that was whole to something that became less tangible, more tactile, like less tactile. Like it's the same book, but it's two complete different stories because words were lost, and things could be misunderstood at the point of where it becomes a different text entirely. And I'm really tied to like ergodic literature, and that just refers to text that requires a reader to make a different or greater than normal effort. And yeah, and it took greater than normal effort for me to actually kind of like visualize and articulate substance. So like this object kind of fit right in for this work. In the installation, directly opposing it are objects that I made, sketchbooks that I filled, and this is there to kind of contrast something I destroyed, or like something that I bought, or like a book that I had no intention in writing in. This thesis diary was made to kind of ease. I thought I was gonna like deinstall like much quicker than I ended up doing now. So I created this object of book, a book to kind of act as a container for all these materials to hold and be viewed together. And it's an amount of like cardboard, and this is what it sounds like. And the spine there are like dotted with nails. So the spine of the book is bound with hammer and nail. Pulling from book research mythology, is I found Ocnus, who's a penitent in Hades, who was condemned to spend like eternity to weave rope out of straw. And to add to his torment, the rope he wove was eaten by a donkey as fast as he made it. And this is there for like the audience to kind of tie into a much more like personal perspective of this object and me, of like how this object could be like viewed as like an obsession, or hell, maybe I was condemned to make rope forever. And there's like a donkey like somewhere that like takes this rope and eats this rope's tactility. And I find that I'm not working with rope any longer, that it's gone. It's no longer in my hands, and it's in in the stomach of a donkey. And um, eating, really, I love eating. So I use like a lot of materials I gain and like trash I glean out of cooking. So these like pepper shaker holders and salt holders, I use the bacon fat from cooking. And this is all here to kind of like articulate this myth I was working with Ocnus and the ass, Ocnus and the donkey. And yeah, these objects are there to refer to the myth I was researching and thinking from, and kind of like really like diving deep in. Um, so I decided to take it further of making it into like a performance, like a cooking thing. Of I perform as Ocnus, the one who makes and ties the rope, but I'm also performing as the ass, as the donkey who eats all that it's made. And this documentation can be found in the book I showed earlier. And this is where I kind of relied. I kind of lied down at this point of cooking, and I found that like digestion could be like a way to kind of think about hyperobject or subsistence of the objects need to be processed and destroyed and digested, where it's unrecognizable for the microorganisms and like all the healthy things that make like allows us to live, to gain nutrient and content from. And I thought that was an interesting place to leave this project. And yeah, I I have a lot more to say. I anticipate all your questions. I don't know, I want to take this with like all the humility I can. I'm really appreciative of all who came out, my mentor, my family, my friends, and I really thank you all, like from the bottom of my heart. And this has been like a very fun project, and I'm excited to hear what y'all think about it.
Thank you so much, Noah, for guiding us through your work. That was awesome. Yeah, so at this time, we'll have questions from B and Jasmine, and then we'll take questions from the larger audience as well. And just like a very gentle reminder that we will be offering questions instead of critiques. So the questions that we're offering will hopefully bring Noah and the audience a deeper understanding of their work.
If I stun you all to silence,
No, I have a quick question. I'm sorry. Oh, there's my raised hand. Sorry.
Oh, y'all should just go ahead.
Noah, what kind of questions do you need from us as your panel to draw more meaning and understanding with your work?
Yeah, well, I did plant some questions out there, but I guess ask like an aspect of the project that you could really like find interested in, or like you feel you want to lean into that. That's a hard question. That's a good question.
And I'm asking because there's a lot in your work that I don't know that we have time to get into in this context. So I just wanted to prioritize making sure that you got feedback about, for instance, the installation strategies that you see behind you, the multifaceted approach for your presenting the different levels and contents and subject matter in your work, and like the mythic size of this project, Noah. It's like this growing, expanding archive, bit like the rope being eaten by the donkey. It also seems to disappear as fast as you make it. So again, I think maybe my first question would be, having had this opportunity to kind of contextualize a lot of choices you've been making, what's the first surprise that the work gave you after you installed it?
I was surprised that it filled up the space. I was like pulling from like so many different, like, you know, my archives from like home studio to like what I've been making like here in the 511 building, to what I've been posting on a lot like online. So I was surprised with how like everything like stayed glued together. I wasn't expecting for it to look as like cohesive as like I told it to be, or like showed it to be. Yeah, Jasmine.
Nice. It's rare that I don't have a question. I sat here and tried to think of, something that I needed clarified. There was nothing really. It was such a clear presentation. I really enjoyed what you brought in terms of thinking about Dayton. Right now I'm in Cincinnati, so I'm like, that's, yeah, I'm like seeing the connection. And I think that what you did, the whole process, you said something about rope as technology. I just, honestly, it's just a moment of praise. So yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation. I wish I'll think of like something that I need clarified, but that would be like me faking it. I don't really have anything.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your work with us today.
Yeah, no, same. Please don't take my not having a million questions for you as a negative. You offered a lot to us that I'm still working through. And again, not having the opportunity to engage in a lot of the choice points. I'm wondering why you're surprised that this project can take up so much space. Were you worried about that? Was
Yeah,
that a concern?
well, I guess I was thinking about like a bit more physically of like, there's some objects I work really small, like the paper cutouts. Ooh, one second. I was like working just like as small as that. So um this like what you see like far away up there is made with a bunch of small images. And like keeping up with these small objects is a task in itself. I also like lose and break things. And also I'm like kind of like I'm not like the craft isn't perfect because like of the immediacy, like I make these objects. So how like fast I like make paintings, like draw things, it's easy like to, like misplace them or not have them in front of my mind when I'm installing. Um, I guess like the worry was just like anxiousness and just like uh, I was working from like such a smaller studio space, a small square before, and I mean that filled up that little cubicle, but I never seen this work in a larger context or in a larger room. So I was like kind of apprehensive, like to dip my toe in of like, like does a space like really hold like warmth for all these objects, because like these objects have been like living in my home like ever since like before, and like I live with these objects, I see them every day, and that yellow table there is my little like a coffee table, and I live in a small studio space, so again like to see them like in the larger public, like a larger also means like more public and people are like allowed to see it. um I don't know, I feel like I've been, it's like such a private person, like ever since like for like the past 4 years, I was just like interested of how I'll be received.
Given how private so much of your production has been, Noah, how has this experience of installing your thesis prepared you for future iterations of this? I think it's more of a palimpsest than a hyperobject, but maybe it's like a difference without a distinction. But I'm wondering, kind of like seeing the objects that you live with exhibited as art objects, how is that going to change maybe your production or your deployment of these objects in the future?
Mhm. I don't think like anything I'll make in that home studio will ever change, but definitely if I encounter more public spaces, I would want to dive in with the initiative of like knowing as a maker that this object was going to be seen by like many others or besides myself. And I mean, like before that, that's not in my forefront of my mind. Like I just think I'm just going to see it, or somebody I invite over is just going to see it. It like uh, I do think about like audience and like how who may be interested in it. Like all the materials could be discussed as like access points for various viewers to kind of engage with, and like I mean like if you're a painter, you might like have stuff to say about painting or things to ask about the painting. If you're a sculptor or like if you're a fisherman, you'll be like, oh, nice net, or we're gonna do those. So I already knew that like my work could touch like a lot of different people, but it wasn't made with the intention to touch all to touch on.
I love hearing that insight, Noah.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
And if anyone, the attendees have a question they don't want to like talk loud, please, I'm reading the chat, so please type them down. Are we opening up? Are we like doing panel only and then panel attendees or?
Yeah, I think I can allow folks from the audience to ask their question to you. It looks like Cheryl has a question.
Hey, Cheryl.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. Beautiful note or work, Noah. I think there's just like so much going on, but like I think and the aspect that kind of drew me in a bit, even though you didn't talk about it for too long, but the idea of eating your work, I think that's so interesting. And you talked about it in relation to that myth. And I was just wondering if you saw it as like fulfilling a legacy or some kind of like, you know, like you did it to fall in lineage with this story, or if you did it out of like a different intention, if you saw it as more like an urge. I'm just curious. And also like this idea of like being both the art maker but also like the ass. That's so like I love that. That's so funny and like interesting to me. So I just was curious how that experience went.
Thank you for your question. Okay, so I think I'm really gonna dive really deep into cooking like later, like after this project and later projects, because like the process itself is like very meditative and it's very like I don't know, you work with materials, ingredients, so like a painter does, or like any other artist does, of like you like gathering and then you processing and then you like combining and putting it together. I guess like that kind of that's how it worked for me, I guess. And the satisfaction I felt of finally eating this rope was more so of like I guess kind of like a selfish like type of like type of position of I get to finally like consume it and eat it. And like this obsession of rope has been with me for like 4 years of processing this object. I get to finally like bite it and just like finally like just tear at it and like no like eventually like shit it out or some shit, like just treat it like as like it felt like the start and finish felt a much more like clear and I guess yeah, it's satisfying in that way of like finally being able to break down this object and like really break down of like what about this rope has been itching the back of my head for me to like be working with it for so long. The more I research, the more I am able to like tie my work into like a historical context. And since like this aspect of this project is like the most fresh and the most new, and I didn't promise this in my like proposal. This is like something that just like came out of like the practice of like making, and the things, the content embedded it like in the object and like in like the idea of like just eating a rope. It's still not it's not as much as like the rope itself, you know. Uh, I expect that time is going to mature and like ferment this this aspect of my practice. But I'm a home cook. I don't know. I really enjoy doing it, and I guess like even the act of like bringing something like cooking into like a fine art context is like just like a fuck you to like anyone that say like cooking isn't part of like art or considered poetry or something like that. Thank you for your question, Cheryl. Delta?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah. Everything that you presented has been incredible. I think it's been really fun experiencing your work in little bits and pieces throughout like my experience at PNCA. And now seeing it under the pretense of like this massive like hyper object it is enlightening. It's really amazing. I think that I really found myself compelled by sort of this idea of like the animation of it. You imbue like a lot of life in each aspect of like this each facet of this object. And I'm kind of curious as to like what mediums you want to pursue with this even further. Like, do you feel like um it's going to be sort of like all like conceptual completion, or do you want like um I don't know, like more representation of it, more like experiential aspects of it? Like I'm just kind of curious, like what's in the like immediate future for
Yeah.
it?
Oh, thank you for your question. I think I'll be working with rope as I am now. I probably won't be like diving deep into like all the iterations of like what it could be or what it is, what it isn't already. I'm like pretty interested like creating those like nets. Um, they may like flow into like wearable objects or um, even more intricate like ways of framing, like as a framing device. Uh, I guess the idea of like what I'm leaving with in this installation is a way to kind of deconstruct like a subject or an object to its like foundation or its like fundamentals. And then I could like transcend back up on and like recreate the object again. And the idea I could do this within the object, like it doesn't have to be the rope. It doesn't have to be like, I don't know, the subject of tactility. It could be like a different passion that I want to articulate or a different research that I wanted to share with you. So like, yeah, I guess like, yeah, the process of like really thinking about our idea and all these like different perspectives for me could be in a much more rounder, multiple interdisciplinary like perspective of the work, Yeah, that's what's in the future.
That's super awesome. It's all really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, Cameron. Cameron.
I think after this, we probably have like just one or two more questions.
I know that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the ability that your rope has to like change, do you feel like it's like a fundamental underlying ability that all things on this earth have to change? Or like, is it like an ability that like all things on earth have?
Definitely. Yeah, it just depends on like the viewer's perspective, like which perspective, like experience you want to like kind of lean into and like really articulate through. Well, not again, but this research of hyperobjects and subsistence could be kind of continued into the conversation of object-oriented ontology. And that's also probably what's in the future of this like conversation.
Thank you.
Can we do 2 more questions? There's a question from panelists and a question from attendees. We can do those. We can do those too. Jasmine, what you got?
Okay. I think a lot about objectivity. And so I think my question is centered on when working with the rope, would you say that in using it in different kind of vessels and channels, would you say that you were the attempt or were you seeking to make the rope legible, or were you seeking to just allow the rope to express in different facets? Like, was it, because you use the word articulate a lot, and that sends my mind to legibility, kind of in relation to different audiences, so kind of making sense. Or would you say that dealing with the rope and putting it in different vessels and channels and different, you know, like technology in different forms, right? Would you say that that was an attempt of just straight up expression or experimentation, or was it to make the rope legible or to make sense, or was it just to, you know, make nonsense in a way, which is a thing as well?
Yeah, you could view this installation both ways. That's like counterclockwise, you could see it, me tearing apart, kind of diffract tactilely from each other to really like make it less tactile and less articulate of and like well defined in our reality. And I feel like that's a very destructive process, and that's like for me to like continually do that for like this project was like I had to be very passionate to keep with it. And only in the way the room is oriented that you could tell the object can transcend back into like a tactile form, back into rope, and like gather all together into this knot and braid and this spiral and this type of collection. And that's the only way you could see it come back together. But if I like another like intention of like maybe encounter this project again in another space, like a different story could be told, you know, like it could be disparate and like mixed together and like just made to be illegible and no intention for you to like make sense of it. I guess I feel like the installation kind of allows me to tell that story of you know, like legibility and that articulation. Thank you for your question. Kindred.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for this amazing presentation and for your work. Really appreciate your insights and kind of like exploration. I was curious, so when you're talking about hyper objects in relation to your work and specifically this installation, I'm wondering how I suppose like the experience of using different materials and different mediums to have these conversations, like how did that affect maybe your relationship to the body of work, the process of like actualization, like the creating process, compared to maybe just like strictly using paint or you know, like tighter parameters around these materials. Yeah, so I like did that affect the through line throughout the work?
It just created more baggage for me to carry like to and from place, and uh, it didn't affect the conceptual part of it. I was really set of like making the rope the entire time, even if I was like using like whiteout like ink to draw it on paper or like cut it out on this page. And I guess that consistency and that obsession kind of like glued together conceptually for me, like to notice like any difference of like material. Like I love how each material carries its own like visual language and its own like historical like concepts and avenues, and that's all there and gathered to kind of like give the work like substance and like meaty like parts and bits. Yeah, I guess I will be able to answer like this question like I feel like after a while, because I feel like this installation is still like very fresh, and what I gained and like what I'm finally like ready to release is kind of like subtle and like it's like being done with like thesis kind of like is like loud and all of like the other like background noise isn't in the forefront of my mind. So that being said, like just being done with thesis and like just like making and making like obsessively and just like after a while I wasn't able to tell the difference of like paint and rope anymore because I had this obsession to like kind of like fuel me through the entire process. Did that answer your question? I feel like I kind of took it.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank
Y'all be great. Y'all a great audience.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Noah. Thanks to Jasmine and V. Thanks to all the audience for your great questions. I think we're gonna bring everybody on to clap for Noah. So if y'all want to turn on your cameras, that would be really nice.
Oh, y'all are cool. So appreciative of all of you. Such happy faces.
You still got a bunch more.
If y'all like it, you can come to B10 Gallery, 511 building. It'll be up. Hopefully, for the weekend.
Yay! That was so good, Noah.
Thank you, Ryan.
You did amazing. We all miss you very much.
Oh, I miss you much more. Hi. Hi, hi. Awesome. Wow. Cool. Oh my goodness. Wow. Y'all made a Black person smile and blush. Y'all made me blush. Y'all know that?
Okay, that's everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Noah.
Thank you. Great job.
Great job, Noah.
Bye, Mom. Hey, Lena, thanks for coming. Thank you. Yeah, he edited Julius Beckham. Thank you for all the edits. He really came through. Y'all gotta head out.